All right, in 5.5, we are going to be performing function operations. So we're going to have two functions. We're going to have to add them, subtract them, multiply them, and divide them. So our basic operations. So when it tells us to add two functions together, it can be written like this, where we have f plus g of x, or it'll say f of x plus g of x. These mean the same thing. We just take our f of x function and add it to our g of x. So we can take any two functions and make a new function just by performing any one of these operations. Same thing with subtraction. It can be written like this, where we just subtract them, or like this, and multiplication and division. So these are our four basic functions that we're going to be doing. We also, in addition to performing these operations, we're going to have to find the domain of the sum, difference, product, and quotient functions. And our domain consists of the x values that are in the domains of both the f and g. So we always have to check what's in our domain of the f function, what's in the domain of our g function, and what overlaps between the two domains is what's going to be the domain of our new function. So we're looking for the overlapping parts. So what overlaps? And then it also says here, additionally, the domain of the quotient does not include x values for which g of x is equal to 0, which we'll get more into that on Wednesday because we're going to do the dividing part on Wednesday. Today we're just focusing on addition, subtraction, and multiplication. So let's look at example 1. We are adding our two functions together. So find f plus g of x and state the domain, then evaluate the sum when x is equal to 4. So this is like 3 problems in one. First thing we need to do is add our two functions together. So f plus g of x is just our f of x function, which is 3 square root x, plus our g of x function, which is negative 10 square root x. So we just add our f of x and g of x together. Can we combine these two? Can we add this and simplify? Can we add these? Yeah. It's like 3 chickens plus negative 10 chickens. They have the same square root x, so we can just combine the coefficients. So what's 3 minus 10? Negative 7. So this is negative 7 square root x. Next, we need to find the domain. So our domain is what overlaps between the two domains of our f of x and our g of x. So first, let's look at the domain of our f of x. I'm going to put it on a number line to help us see what overlaps. So for f of x, what number can we not plug in for x? Can we have anything that we can't plug in? Can't have a negative under the square root. So our domain of f is going to be everything from 0 to infinity. And then what about g of x? What can we not plug in for x here? Can't plug in negative numbers, so our domain is going to be from 0 to infinity again. So for both of these, we can't plug in negative numbers. To find our domain of f plus g of x, it's what overlaps between the two. So from 0 to infinity is what overlaps. So our domain of our function is from 0 to infinity. And we put brackets around 0 because It's including 0. Because we can plug 0 and we can take the square root of 0. We just can't take the square root of a negative number. So we're including 0, that's why we put a bracket. Last thing we need to do is evaluate the sum when x is equal to 4. So we just want to plug in 4 into our f plus g of x. So now we have f plus g of 4. So we just plug in 4 for x. So negative 7 square root of 4. And we just solve. What's the square root of 4? 2. So negative 7 times 2, which is negative 14. So again, this is like 3 questions in one. We have to find the sum of our functions, the domain of our function, and evaluate. All right, example 2, we are subtracting our 2 functions. So we have to take our f of x and subtract g of x. So our f of x is 3x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5. It tells us we have to subtract our g of x, so minus everything in the g of x, which is 3x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 2. What can we do to simplify this? What should we do first? Distribute the negative. So we're distributing the negative to everything after it. So this is 3x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5 minus x cubed plus 3x squared minus 4x plus 2. So we just changed the sign of everything after our negative. Now what do we do? We combine like terms. So what's 3x cubed minus x cubed? Two x cubed. Next we have negative 2x squared plus 3x squared. Plus x squared. Then we have just minus 4x. And then plus 5 plus 2. So this would be plus 7. So this is our new function. Next we have to find the domain. So I'm going to make my number line. Is there anything in my f of x function that I cannot plug in here? No. So my domain for f of x is all real numbers. So it's everything on the number line. And then what about for g of x? Anything I cannot plug in here? Nope. So I have all real numbers again for g of x. So what overlaps between the two? All real numbers. They are both all real numbers. So my domain for my new function is all real numbers, which you can write all real numbers as this little symbol, or you can say negative infinity to infinity, or you can write all real numbers, or you can say ARN, all real numbers. So however you want to write it, you do you. They all mean the same thing. Lastly, we need to evaluate. So we are plugging in negative 2 into our new function. So we have f minus g of negative 2. So we're going to plug in negative 2 for all of our x's. So we have 2 minus 2 cubed plus negative 2 squared minus 4 times negative 2 plus 7. So let's take this one step at a time. What is negative 2 cubed? negative 8. So negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 is negative 8. What's negative 8 times 2? Negative 16. Next, we have negative 2 squared. What's negative 2 times negative 2? 4. And then we have negative 4 times negative 2. Positive 8. And then plus 7. So what is negative 16 plus 4 plus 8 plus 7? So you can add this any way you want. You can take it one step at a time. 16 plus 4 would be negative 12, plus 8, negative 4 plus 7, 3. Or just add all the positives together, then subtract 16. However you want to add and subtract it. So here we have our new function. We have our domain. And we have our value. Any questions on this one? So I just want to kind of reiterate, explain this in case people still don't really understand how we got all real numbers and maybe you're just not asking. But for our domain, so this is for domain. If we have a square root, we can't have negatives under the square root. So anytime we see a square root, we have to make sure whatever's under it is not negative. And then we can't have 0 in a denominator of a fraction. So anytime you have a problem with fractions or with square roots, this is where you really need to focus on your domain. Everything else is going to be all real numbers. Can we have a negative under a cube root? Can we have the cubed root of negative 8? If our index is odd, yes, we can have a negative under a cubed root. So yes, if we had a cubed root, this would be all real numbers. So it's only for square roots or if our index is even. So square root or fourth root if our index was even. But we can have negatives under an odd index. So these are the two things that you want to keep an eye out for. All right, let's go to the next example. So here we're multiplying two functions. So we need to take our f times g of x. So f of x is x squared, g of x is square root of x. So x squared times square root of x. Can we multiply these? No. If we wanted to make that square root of x an exponent, what would it be? 1/2. X to the power of 1/2. Now our bases are the same, so if we wanted to combine them, what do we have to do to the exponents? So we add them. If we're adding fractions, we need our denominator to be the same, so we can change this 2 to be what? 4/2? Because we make it 2/1. 2/1, multiply the top and the bottom by 2, so 4/2. So we get x to the power of 5/2. So this is our new function f times g of x. Now let's find our domain. So I'm going to start with my number line. For my function f of x, x squared, do I have any restrictions on my domain here? Anything I can't plug into x? No. So x squared would be all real numbers. What about for the square root of x? We cannot have a negative, so it's going to be from 0 to infinity. So we're only looking at what overlaps, so from 0 to infinity. So we only care about what overlaps to 0 to infinity. So what's my domain? Zero to infinity. And 0, I need a bracket because I can plug in 0 there. We're including 0. Alright, so now we have to evaluate when x is equal to 9. So I'm going to plug 9 into my x in my new function. So f times g of 9. So 9 to the 5/2 power. How do I evaluate this? Square root of 9 to the 5th power. What's the square root of 9? 3. So 3 to the 5th power. What's 3 to the 5th power? 243. Any questions here? Alright, next let's find our domain. So for x to the 2/3 power, what would our index be if we change this into a radical? What's our index? Perfect. Our index is 3 to the cubed root. Can we have negatives under the cubed root? Yes. So what would our domain of f of x be? All real numbers. What about for g of x? Again, we have the cubed root. We said we can have negatives under that, so what do you think our domain is? What's our domain for g of x? All real numbers. So what's overlapping? All real numbers. So our domain of our new function is all real numbers. So now let's plug in 8. So we have f plus g of 8. So 5 times 8 to the 2/3 power. How do we solve this? What should we do first? Take the cubed root of 8 squared. What's the cubed root of 8? 2. And what's 2 squared? 4. And 4 times 5? 20. So f plus g of 8 is 20. So we took care of everything for f plus g of x. Now we need to do it all again for f minus g of x. So f minus g of x. Now we just subtract our function. So we have negative 2x to the power of 2/3 minus 7x to the power of 2/3. What do we get when we subtract these now? Negative 9x to the power of 2/3. So this is our new function. Let's find our domain. We have our number line. What was our domain of f of x? All real numbers. What's our domain of g of x? All real numbers. So what overlaps? All real numbers. So our domain is all real numbers, and now let's evaluate. So again, we're plugging in 8. So we have f minus g of 8 is equal to negative 9 times 8 to the power of 2/3. What's 8 to the power of 2/3? 4. We just did it, but let's do it again. So the cubed root of 8 would be 2. And then we have 2 squared times negative 9. So 4 times negative 9? Negative 36.